I think we got a clip of Kristen's new movie. Do you want to set this up for us?
Kristen's new movie?
Oh, this is your new movie.
Along the eastern shoulder of the Cherbourg Peninsula, the beaches of Normandy are strung. The chilly waters of the Channel reach
When
quietly
we think of
up
World
the
War
sand.
II, the first things that come to mind are the various battles and political leaders that occupied the news headlines for years. D-Day was one of the most important battles of World War II. Now you might be wondering what D-Day actually means. Well, D-Day and H-hour are used for the day and hour on which a battle or operation is to be set out that isn't determined or announced yet. And that's why the battles are called that way.
More drinks, sir?
Yeah, I'll take some more. Isaac, do you know what day it is today?
It's June 6th, as I recall.
Do you know what the significance of today is?
Well, on this day 10 years ago, my mother died of brain cancer.
Well, today is also an extremely important day in World War II history. On this day, 74 years ago, 156,000 American, British, and Canadian forces invaded the 50-mile stretch of Normandy Beach. The Germans invaded northwestern France back in May 1940. America entered the war in 1941, and in 1942 they and the British forces, who had fled from the beaches of Dunkirk in May 1940 after they split from the Germans in the Battle of France, were considering a large-scale invasion with the Allied forces across the English Channel. Throughout the following year, Allied plans for a cross-channel invasion began to ramp up. In November 1943, Adolf Hitler became aware of plans for an Allied invasion of his territory. Because of this, he put General Erwin Rommel in charge of direction of defense operations in the region. Even though the Germans were unaware exactly where the Allies would strike, Hitler ordered Rommel to finish a 2,400-mile fortification of bunkers, landmines, and beach and water obstacles known as the Atlantic Wall. Arguably the most important figure on the Allied forces in this battle was General Dwight D. Eisenhower. On January 1944, Eisenhower was appointed as the commander of the U.S. Army. During the weeks building up to the battle, the Allies carried out a massive deception operation for the sole purpose to make the Germans think the main invasion target was Pas de Calais. Pas de Calais was the narrowest point between Britain and France. It is a section in northern France named after the French designation of the Strait of Dover, which it borders. Alongside this operation, Eisenhower led the Germans to accurately believe that Norway and other countries were also places the Allies would attack. Many tactics were used to carry out the deception, including fake military equipment, an army to impersonate Allied forces commanded by George Patton, double agents, and fraudulent radio transmissions. Now, Eisenhower laid down all of these deception tactics to completely throw off where Germany should send troops, and it worked well. But the time came for Eisenhower to plan the attack. He did so with British General Bernard Montgomery and a few other higher-ups in the Allied forces.
Eisenhower had confidence in the plan, deemed Operation Overlord, based upon when he addressed the American soldiers on June 5th, one day before the attack. He said, "This operation is not being planned with any alternatives. This operation is planned as a victory, and that's the way it's going to be. We're going down there, and we're throwing everything we have into it, and we're going to make it a success."
The day after is the day Operation Overlord was put into motion, June 6, 1944. The Allied forces landed in by landing crafts, filled to the brim with troops, ready to exact revenge on the German brethren. 5 different areas of Normandy Beach were given special code names, being Utah Beach, Omaha Beach, Gold Beach, Juno Beach, and Sword Beach. Each of these landing locations were armed with a battalion of men, all commanded with different leaders within the U.S. Army. Once the soldiers made landfall, the American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions dropped at the base of the Continental Peninsula. They suffered many casualties by drowning, but nevertheless they secured their objective. The British Air Forces followed suit and secured their objectives as well. 23,000 US and British paratroopers landed in France behind the German defensive lines by parachute. The invasion force of more than 155,000 troops included 50,000 vehicles, 1,000 of which were tanks, nearly 7,000 naval craft, and more than 11,500 aircraft supported the attack. Soon after the Allied forces made their move, the Germans began to fight back with support. Under the overall command of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel,
the Germans had deployed 5 divisions of infantry, 1 airborne division and 1 tank division along the Normandy coast and held the advantage in battle positioning. However, the Allies had the upper hand in naval and air power. Both the 1st and 29th Divisions struggled the most by far when landing at Omaha Beach. The brutal German resistance stationed there caused over 3,000 casualties to the Allied troops before they could be stationed there by the end of the day. Despite this, the Allies were able to lead the Germans to believe the point of contact between the troops to be further northeast, closer to the Belgian border. The Germans, who were being led on, began slowly moving their troops north to protect the beach. However, the Germans eventually caught the Allied troops during their slow expansion of territory on the beaches. After they broke out of Normandy, they advanced rapidly to liberate France and Belgium, and portions of the Netherlands. Allied forces reached the German border fortifications, the Siegfried Line, in mid-September 1944. U.S. units also advanced towards the vital Roer River Dam that they sought to capture in order to prevent the Germans from flooding areas to the north, thus delaying the advance into Germany itself. On D-Day, Allied troops suffered more than 10,000 casualties. British and Canadian forces suffered around 3,700 casualties. U.S. forces took about 6,600 casualties, and the German defenders lost between 4,000 and 9,000 men. In total, over 425,000 Allied and German troops were killed, wounded, or went missing during the Battle of Normandy. In Anne Frank's diary, she wrote her opinions on D-Day. "This is the day the invasion has begun. Is this really the beginning of the long-awaited liberation? The liberation we've talked so much about, which still seems too good, too much of a fairy tale to ever come true? Will this year, 1944, bring us victory? We don't know yet, but there's hope and there's life. It fills us with fresh courage and makes us strong again."
Looks like our time here has run out. I hope you enjoyed our time together, and I hope you learned something valuable about one of the most important battles of the war.
1,500 missing who never were found from this
That's called
area.
the Garden of the Missing over there, and the names are all on the wall on the other corner of the cemetery.
This cemetery, Saint Laurent, includes all the D-Day casualties, most of those back in through the Normandy fighting, I suppose.
Until we broke out.
Walter, this D-Day has a very special meaning for me. My mind goes back so often to this fact. On D-Day, my own son graduated from West Point. And after his training with his division, he came over with the 71st Division. But on the very day he was graduating, these men came here, British and our other allies, Americans, to storm these beaches for one purpose only: not to gain anything for ourselves, not to fulfill any ambitions that America had for conquest, but just to preserve freedom, systems of self-government. Now, my own son has been very fortunate. He has had a very full life since then. He is a father of 4 lovely children that are very precious to my wife and me. But these young boys, so many of them, over whose graves we have been treading, looking at, wondering and contemplating about their sacrifices, they were cut off in their prime. They have families that grieve for them, but they never knew the great experiences of going through life like my son. I think and hope, pray, that the humanity will learn more than we had learned up to that time. But these people gave us a chance, and they bought time for us so that we can do better than we have before. So every time I come back to these beaches, or any day when I think about that day 20 years ago, I say once more, we must find some way to work to peace and to really to gain an eternal peace for this world.
Sure.